Three, two, one.
Hi, I'm Susanna.
And I'm Lewis.
And you're watching Switched. We'd like to begin this week's episode by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we filmed this episode, and also pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Last week, we discussed all things Disney Plus and Mulan and, all of those interesting conversations that have been happening around streaming platforms, and we're looking forward to this week. End of this week, we're filming on the Monday, so the end of this week that will be coming out, so hopefully by next week we can bring some of the stats on that we talked about last week.
For sure.
This week, wanted to move across to another, I don't want to say streaming platform, but digital platform that's been having some interesting issues come up in the last week or so.
So recently, Susanna, we've seen, if you've been using Google, YouTube, all these other, big tech giants, they have put out a open letter to the Australian users saying that your rights about consuming news, more specifically, is at jeopardy.
Yes,
so
they certainly have been.
Yeah, and so what they're saying is, essentially they're putting a warning out campaign against the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, which, at the request of the Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg, they've developed a mandatory code that would require Google to share a portion of its multi-million-dollar advertising revenue with the Australian media organisations and newspapers.
Mm-hmm.
So, this is what's happening. Essentially, you were talking that it's going to... What did you mention? So it's going to push like the ABC News...
So basically what's happening is the Australian government has stated that they've recognised that they're trying to put forward this code to address a bargaining power imbalance that they're saying currently exists between Australian news media corporations and the big global media platforms, digital platform distribution services. Specifically, they are currently mostly focusing on Google and Facebook. Obviously, those are two of the biggest. Obviously, Google is the biggest digital platform that is used. And so basically the Australian government is making the argument with this code that currently Australian news media companies they're currently accepting lower amounts of revenue and lower payments than they would typically in order to have their content appearing on these big platforms.
Okay.
And they're arguing that Australian media companies shouldn't have to accept less.
Very fair enough. Very fair enough. Look, the way I've seen it, and I've seen this, and I've briefly read through it, and I've done some external research on it, and what you've mentioned then and told me, it seems like a bit of a scare tactic, right?
A bit, yeah.
Yeah, to put the people who sort of don't read it and just, you use Google and there's an alert coming, you're like, oh, this must be serious. Because when I first saw it, I was like, oh wow, this must be serious. But the more you sort of read into it, and the more sort of background knowledge you get on it, they're saying, look, other big tech giants like this have used this tactic before to further advance their ad revenue. And so, look, at the end of the day, it's just got something to do with revenue, money rules the world, really, doesn't it? So.
Exactly, and there's certainly there are some concerns, I think, not so much for big platforms like ABC News or Seven or anything, but more so for independent journalists and small local news corporations and how this code will affect them. And there's certainly some very valid questions and concerns around that. However, the idea that it's going to affect the general public in terms of what you can search for and what appears when you open, for example, your Facebook news feed or your YouTube news feed, you still have control over those things. You can unfollow things. You can, you've read and agreed to all of the privacy acts. When you click that, I have read and understood. And also, it is very specifically stated that this code will not breach Australian privacy laws.
Yeah,
which is important.
I think that's what people are most concerned about, right? Is their data,
user data, yeah,
their carbon footprint, not their carbon footprint, their digital footprint. Footprint. But I think that's what most people are worried about. At the end of the day, I don't think this is going to change too much from how I use Google and how I consume my news.
Yeah, exactly.
I
typically just go to, if I'm looking at legitimate news articles, I typically go to the ABC anyway, so that's not going to change because I'm still going to type into I'm not even going to do a Google search. I'm just going to go to abc.com.au and go straight there for my news. It's not like I'm going to be, necessarily just searching through Google. And it doesn't mean that, you're suddenly not going to be able to access certain information. You still have access to it. You just might have to be a little bit more specific in your searches.
You say if it does happen and Google gets affected, so to speak, it'd be interesting to see how much changes, I guess, or if it's just they lose money. But it's an interesting thing because, we've seen regional newspapers evaporate thanks to coronavirus.
Yeah. So, we're already in a very uncertain time.
Yeah, and consuming news, and people are probably now more so than ever really specific about the news that they read and that they consume. Everything sort of, the fake news stuff coming out, people's opinion. So I guess it is important to be consuming the right. But at the end of the day, I don't think people want, certain articles or platforms where you consume news to be pushed to the forefront. It'll be interesting to see what happens out of this. But I think it's interesting the approach that they've done with the they've brought out the hashtag fair code, which will be interesting to see how that trends through Twitter and all those.
It will be
and stuff like that. But I think it's just it's a fear tactic, it's a scare tactic, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
And I think it's interesting because this particular argument of, the concern for small businesses, small news corporations and individual journalists, it's something that you see a lot in the entertainment industry and the media industry as a whole, across so many platforms. The big corporations always have an upper hand. They've got more capital to build on, they get more revenue streams, more ad profits, all of those things. They have access to more resources, better distribution outlets, all of those kinds of things. And it's not the first time that Google has had, some interesting issues around issues between what large corporations and smaller corporations get. Really interesting. It's not really a case study because I guess everyone really knows about it these days. But if you just look at YouTube, which is one of the things that they're saying this code is going to affect, the annual salary of a YouTuber these days is going to be significantly higher than it was, say, 10 years ago. What were you watching on YouTube about 10 years ago, Lewis?
10 years, I would have been, 13? I don't know. Probably, basketball-related videos. Stuff like that. Stuff I was interested in, which I still consume to this day.
I think the YouTube that I watched about 10 years ago was when my friends wanted to show me a funny video. Funny cat videos.
Yeah.
Those videos that are always they're the one where the car goes around the corner and you're waiting for it to reappear and then someone jumps out in your face.
Nightmare stuff.
All that kind of thing. The idea of a YouTuber, I don't think existed, say, 10, 12 years ago.
In the last 5, even 7 years, it's taken off.
It's absolutely insane. I do some work in the childcare education sector. And I have children telling me, I want to be. I'm like, what do you want to be when you grow up? You've got the typical ones you expect. You get, you get some people saying, I want to be an astronaut. I want to be a dancer. I want to be an engineer. I want to build bridges. I want to be a teacher. Now I ask people what they want to do, and I want to be a YouTuber, which is a very because certainly when I was about 7 or 8, that was not my aspiration. I wasn't even an actor. Yes, a YouTuber. It's interesting. And I think there's so many of them that are so big, and you see these millions upon millions of dollars they're making. They're making huge amounts of money.
Yeah.
But what's not so noticed is the fact that those ones that are making large amounts of money are a drop in the pool that is YouTube creators.
Oh, it's overflow, right? There's so much saturation and so much. It's a competitive market, just like any sort of entertainment industry, right?
Exactly.
It's competitive. So it is interesting to say that these kids growing up now want to be a YouTuber or make content. I guess because it's so easy to access, right? All you have to do is just type on YouTube and the algorithms push something and you like it, you subscribe, and then you become loyal to that.
And it is a great option for content creators. So,
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
not just for the audiences,
Mm.
but for content creators. You know, YouTube has gone from being a place of funny videos and stuff to being a place where you can really create what you want to create. And you can create, you know, with YouTube Red, with, you know, the fact that everyone has access to cameras so easily now. You know, even just your iPhone can create
Yeah.
high quality things. You're getting so much more of an influx of this short form, high production value content on a streaming platform that's totally free to access.
Yeah, and that is the thing, right? It is free, and I know. I mean, you talk about 10 years ago what you're consuming. How many ads are on YouTube 10 years ago? None, probably.
Unless you wanted to watch an ad
now,
replay.
Yeah, now, like, I was watching a video just the other night, and, like, I had stopped it, like, the night before, and I was like, I was getting tired, so I stopped it, and I was like, I'll revisit this tomorrow, and I skipped ahead to where I was, and I had to, like, not skip, but watch four Hungry Jack's ads just to get to where I was.
Just to watch the actual video
so
you
I was
wanted
like,
to
oh
watch.
my god, like, you know. So it is interesting, the dynamic of how, you know, consuming content has changed. I mean, obviously, anytime something is popular, advertisers want to jump on that, and there's, you know, you get into influencers and stuff now, and essentially they are influencers, right?
They are influencers.
Because you get some videos, if there's like a host or something like similar to this, and you upload this to YouTube, you have like your third-party advertisers that come through and advertise on the video, but then beforehand, they might be selling you Manscaped or something along those lines. You
Goodness
know, like,
knows what these days.
So there's so much opportunity to make money for people.
And
I think that's what entices these young kids to. And it looks like easy work, but it's not. So.
And like it's really good that we've gotten to a place now where, you know, we're no longer relying on the big Hollywood studios to create content. You know, people don't have to wait until they get a job at Fox or at Universal or Disney. They don't have to. They can go and make their own stuff and actually rise up from a YouTube channel into things like, you know, where there's people that started out on YouTube that have now ended up with shows on Netflix. And, you know, the step, you know, from Netflix can be to one of these big studios. Or, you know, Netflix is, you know, rising in power in general kind of thing. You don't even need to go to the big studios. Yeah. And it's interesting how, you know, these small, what is considered very small content, short form content, amateur content is actually shifting the way that content is being consumed generally.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because you have to essentially you're selling something other than yourself. I mean, you got to provide something that people want to watch, and there's so many different people doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So you have to have now more than ever. I mean, 10 years ago, you probably had more of an opportunity to do it. You just had to have the idea. Even 5 years ago, really. But now, like, you know, you see so many different people just doing the exact same thing, right? Like vlogging about whatever they do with their life. But I mean, you gotta. There's something about that person that draws you back. So it's a saturated market.
It is, you know, and it'll be interesting to see, you know, whether this shift over to the short form and the YouTube and Netflix, you know, obviously it's massively disrupted the studios. Over the last few years, caused them some actual issues in terms of the fact that making big productions is expensive, particularly in a coronavirus world, and it's challenging. But people are more easily able to create their own content from things like, you know, they want to make their own movie. You can make a movie and post it to YouTube and have people see, whether you're making money off it or not, you can have people see what you're creating. And, you know, there then becomes in questions of things like, you know, are people getting paid for the stuff that they're making? People are making amazing stuff and not earning money because the systems that are even in place for them to earn money are actually highly discriminatory against small content producers. So, for example, I think we were having a look earlier for an ad views. Per 1,000 ad views, the content creator gets what?
$3 to $5.
$3 to $5, which when you have 10 million YouTube subscribers, adds up
very well.
Adds up very nicely when you have 1,000.
Yeah. And you got to imagine, like, it's sort of like anything. You got to continually publish something, right? You can't just take a month off and then help, you know, the algorithm just put you back up. You know, you got to. These guys work hard.
They do, and it, you know, maybe that's one of the things that people are, you know, concerned about with this media bargaining code that we were discussing earlier, is the fact that, you know, these independent journalists are going to struggle to have their work seen because they can't afford to have it seen, because they're not earning I think it's $150,000 profit that you had to have made in the last financial year in order to be able to actually be eligible for the code. And so, you know, this is an issue not just for media companies, but for general content creators.
Yeah.
And I guess it's a case of seeing, does that lack of revenue outweigh the opportunities
And that's
that
the thing.
these platforms give?
Who wants to, make all this great content just for a big company like Google or Facebook to take a chunk of ad revenue, right?
Exactly.
So it sort of limits the opportunity of people being like, this is
Yeah.
worth my time and my investment. So
And maybe there's space, maybe there needs to be more space for more companies like Netflix that started out as really a piracy company.
Yeah. Mm.
It started out as a small company that was people going, let's give people access to stuff cheaper.
Mm.
And now is actually, it's what it is today. Maybe there's opportunities for more of these smaller places and collaboration zones to be brought forward that allow for people to post their content. Places like Hit Record. I'm not sure if you've heard of that. It's Joseph Gordon-Levitt's company.
Okay.
But basically is a space where he basically has this platform that allows anyone to come and create and post and collaborate and say, I've got this idea, I just made this little 30-second clip of a recording of some music. It's just a little riff. And then other people come and go, oh, that's so cool. What if we added this to it? And it's this collaboration space that once it gets to a point where it's actually becoming a fully formed idea, there's actually opportunity for funding for those artists. It's a very interesting company that he's created.
Yeah, right.
That is a great space for collaboration. But even these ones still raise the question of, are these artists getting paid?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Spotify's had the same issue with their streaming service. I'm pretty sure Netflix has had the same, and they take a lot of the money. Look,
Apple's come under fire
huge,
for music.
Even
and
the
iTunes
Fortnite thing at the moment. I don't know if you read into that.
No, I haven't.
I'm not a big gamer or anything, but I was just doing it for the assignment.
Yeah.
But I think it's Epic Games. I think they're the people who produce that.
Yeah.
They've been taken out of the App Store because purchases through the App Store take 30% of the purchase. So now there's a big backlash on that. There's no real alternative to the App Store.
Yeah.
And I think that's what people are pissed about. There's no sort of alternative where they can put their content and, not be ripped off. And
Exactly.
So, and like you mentioned earlier, this is when things like Hit Record and other, platforms where people can collaborate, produce, distribute, you're going to see more of them pop up.
Yeah, I think that there's some really awesome opportunities out there for people to, get their stuff, get their work out there, and maybe more legislative and legal coding and pieces of legislation will allow for ensuring that creators do have the opportunity to get paid or access the money that is being made off their content, because it's not even necessarily about being paid for their content, but the amount of money that the companies make off the ads that play before their content that wouldn't be able to be played without their content. And working through these things to make sure that everyone is being benefited from these issues and these new codes and everything. And it's good to it is good to see that at least whether it's being addressed correctly or not is probably not as relevant as the fact that it is being addressed.
Yeah.
And it is, if this does nothing then bring a conversation forward, that's still a step in the right direction.
Yeah, media is a tricky thing. I mean, there's always going to be legislations and stuff that aren't going to go the content creators' way. They're always the people going to get screwed. But we'll hopefully, like you said, this is a step in the right direction. We're talking about it. Hopefully we can spark conversation with other people.
Yeah, and arts funding's always had lots of, questions and everything about it, and there'll continue to be some. And, I think now is a really important time for us to get out there and support people, because it's a really tough time for independent creators. With coronavirus, it's really hard to get your stuff out there.
And this is the thing, right? This virus and the pandemic, it's going to completely change the way we consume, collaborate, and distribute and create content. So it'll be very interesting to see the next 5 years.
Yeah. Let us know if you guys have your thoughts on this new media bargaining code, if you've heard from it. Your thoughts on Google and Facebook's response to it. Whether you think that their response is, adequate. Is it actually, are they in favor of the people that they say that they're helping? Is the code in favor? Let us know, your thoughts on the changes that YouTube and Netflix have brought, in fact, to the content. You know, what do you guys watch? Where do you, consume your media content? We'd love to, get a better understanding of,
For sure.
where everyone actually consumes this.
Let us know if you've actually read the little pop-up on Google too. Because
is Google even being effective with their own ads?
Yeah.
Yeah,
their own sort of,
We'd love for you guys to subscribe, send us some comments, check out our social medias. We're at Switched Media, both on Instagram and Facebook. And we will see you guys in next week's episode, where we will have our first guest. We're moving into, it's almost September, we're moving into Pride Month, which is exciting. So we're going to get a chance to have a look into the media industry and the representation and the effects of the media industry has on the LGBTQ plus community, and should have some really interesting conversations coming up in the next few weeks.
Wonderful. Looking forward to it.
Alrighty, we'll see you guys next week.